Even if Dr. Yonty Friesem from Chicago specifically asked me not to introduce him, I still feel like I would like to do so. He's the co-director of the Media Education Lab and an associate professor of communication at Columbia College Chicago, USA, and he's the co-founder of the Illinois Media Literacy Coalition, who helped the first state to mandate media literacy for every high school. For 20 years, Yonty has been providing professional development for educators to enhance their students' media literacy skills. His researches focus on youth media as a form of leadership building and community engagement. In 2022, Yonty co-edited the Routledge Handbook on Media Education Future Post-Pandemic. Thank you very much, Yonty, for being here today with us.
Thank you. Hello. So I'm the barrier to your coffee break, so I'll be brief. I'm gonna talk about my teaching. So René's keynote was helpful to explain what's going on. I'll go very quickly about some, I'm sure, images that you're familiar with and and I'll go into how I'm teaching media literacy at the university level, and then I'll talk really briefly about the Illinois case that I helped to do the legislation, why it's a unit of instruction, that René kind of built up for it, what's the good thing about it. So, and if we have time, I'll talk about some UNESCO initiatives, but I'm not sure we'll get there. Why context matter, right? So we have a lot of examples of like when we see one image and what we think it is, well, what it is really. Why framing matter? Right? Examples of how you can manipulate an image. I wanted to show you a great video of Morgan Freeman. We don't hear. So anyway, the voice and it's deep fake. So you can look online. It's a Dutch company that is doing deep fake and are showing you how it's done, as celebrating and saying this is synthetic reality. That's where we live in, which is pretty frightening. René, I don't know if you were mentioning the EAVI European framework of what is misinformation. And you're talking about alternative facts. So we all heard, and you'll hear more about what is the problem, but I want to talk about the solution and what you could do, especially the Fulbright scholars and the students here that are going to go and teach. What are methods that we can do to actually change things? So this is my class. That's the first slide in my class that I'm using. Not all the students get the joke, but that's fine. And the idea is that this is a freshman class that teaches media literacy. And what I do with my students, this is my classroom. You can see it's a picture I took 2 weeks ago. I'm doing a lot of games in the beginning of the class. We're using What's the Meme and other games. I just found a game about Trump's tweets that I'm going to incorporate. So it's cards with fake tweets and real tweets of Donald Trump, and you need to know which one are real and which one are fake. So it's kind of a research thing. What I do for the whole semester, I have the students research conspiracy theories. So they choose in a group a conspiracy theory they want to research, and then over the semester, we are learning different methods of analysis of those conspiracy theories. And how do we do that? So first questions that I want to share and see, I want to ask 3 people here, and I'll be very strategic. How do you get your news? Okay, where do you get your news?
Yeah, I'm using news aggregators. I know the authors of the news selection, but I'm not relevant at all.
Okay, thank you. David, how do you get your news?
From my parents.
Okay, very nice. How do you get your news?
Media.
Okay. I asked the same questions the first day with my students. And interestingly, I don't know if you can see, it might be far, it was very interesting to see the different outlet and ways that they're getting information. Another group you can see there. So TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. Interesting, right? Then here I combined two other, and one of them needed to show me the size, like how much they're getting. So mostly from TikTok, then Instagram, then YouTube. And we agree as a class that most of the news, my students specifically, who are freshmen, 18 years old, are getting their news from YouTube, which was very interesting for me. This is definitely not the way that I'm getting the news. But that's part of the question and the student voice that I want to advocate here. So Renee was talking about the trust and the question that was the first question about the lack of trust. What I want to share here is the first thing I think would be helpful is when you build trust with your students. And if you build trust with your students and work on that in the classroom itself, that's one way to start building toward media literacy practices and start to retrusting the journalistic institution and the civic organizations. As you can see, I mean, this is from COVID, the different types of trust. I'm talking about really the relationship in the classroom that then, as a ripple effect, go to the organizational, market, and societal trust. So we need to start in our own classroom with our own students. Great. How do you do that? So, this is a media literacy movie called Trust Me. The whole idea is that you shouldn't trust like the media, and it's a very frightening, and the students are like, whoa, it's about the anti-vax and about the consequences. When this movie is open to the public this week because it's the Media and Information Literacy Week, and there is, it's open for you to look at it, and it's easy to get this movie in different channels. So that's part of the thing, and then they need to reflect on how they felt about it. Additionally, you need to be open and really talk about the different types of media addiction. This is a real problem. This is something that the students and each one of us, Renee was saying that she's sleeping with the phone. How many of us are doing that? How many of us can live without our phone for 1 hour? Right? Good. Good for you. 2 people in the whole audience. Okay. Says something. So, as much as we're joking, this is a serious issue. People don't want to admit it, and it's something to talk in the class, because this is part of the way that we are consuming media. It's part of our daily life. Another thing is to talk about echo chamber and to look at the statistic and how echo chambers are really shaping the way that we're living and consuming media. I love this because this is really, I think, a brave way of Dr. Gretchen Goldman during COVID. Like, she's a very respected scientist who was interviewed at CNN, but then she tweeted, this is like she want to be honest. And how many of us experienced that, right? So as much as it's hilarious, there is here a statement about motherhood, about parenting during COVID, and I can definitely identify with it. And that's part of what we're doing in a media literacy class. That's part of creating the trust, because yes, the CNN frame looks very professional, but what's happening behind it? What's really going on there? And that's part of what we're doing to build trust in the class. We need to talk about how media companies are making money. What I do is I use this game that I found in one of the store, Business Walrus, but the way we're doing it is very engaging. The students are figuring it out as they're playing in their table and using different game and play and fun, but mystifying how really is the money made from their consumption of media. When we look at you call it conflict entrepreneurs, so I think Joe Rogan is the king, using Spotify and YouTube. It's really looking at what is the revenue that they're getting and really having them analyze. And I have my students go to the conspiracy theory, go and find what is the revenue, what is the cost for their production, and then what is their return of investment. Doing this analysis, business analysis, after playing the game is really starting to helping and demystify. Next time that they're listening to Joe Rogan, they're thinking about this. They're figuring it out, oh, okay, so that's what's happening here. And understanding how the whole money is behind it. And eventually in the class, this is just one example, they're creating a website, and then each one of the students are doing work on this conspiracy theory, triangulating sources, figuring it out, what's the business model to spread and why they're spreading it, what are the needs that the conspiracy theory people who spread it are applying to those specific needs of fear, of anxiety, of control of the people who are consuming it. So that's really in a nutshell, and happy to discuss more about it. And I want to move, and talking about, of course, native advertising, but I want to move to the Illinois Media Literacy Coalition and the bill that Renee mentioned. So I created 3 years ago the Illinois Media Literacy Coalition. And that's something that we were talking on the famous porch more than a year ago about we should do a conference and think about starting something similar in Romania. Now this is a 100 people volunteering organization. That's the advocacy that Renee was talking that Texas was lacking. But unlike what usually happens that you have an advocacy group and then you get to legislation, what happened here is there was a work of 6 years of legislation, and once the legislation passed, then I established this organization. And the idea was that, okay, this is the language of the law that you can see that I helped shape, and it has like, not my footprint, but your footprint, Renee, of like the scholarship of what it means media literacy, because it didn't have explaining. It was the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create and communicate using a variety of collective forms. If you're a teacher, you don't know what it means. It's like, okay, fine. But then I added the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to really explain and share. You don't have to do it, but that's what it means. And that was a big change that took a lot of political maneuvering, but we got there. Now, Illinois is very weird, and I think in a great way, that they said you need to teach a unit of instruction. What the heck is a unit of instruction? So basically it can be a 5-minute, or it could be a year-long, because it's a unit. But what it does, unlike New Jersey has the superintendent of library decide what is the curriculum, and top-down going to tell all the librarians that's what you need to do. And you can imagine what's going to happen there. That's my assumption that it's not going to really be implemented. In Illinois, what they said, okay, we're forcing you to do, but you, the teacher, decide what you want to do. You decide with your students how it's going to work. You're really going to apply. And that's something that is really innovative worldwide that Illinois did in this. Yes, there's a mandate, but the mandate is very flexible to explain. So we created the Illinois Media Literacy Coalition in order to help teachers because, okay, I'm a teacher. I never learned media literacy. I think it's important, but what do I need to do? So we have only 4 pages on our website. And what we have is we created this explanation of why. Because as I'm going to explain tomorrow in the workshop, you need first to engage and to understand the why. There is the reason of why. So media literacy gives you freedom. Once you have the critical thinking and you understand how the media industry works and what's the effect on you, you have the freedom of choice. Well, when you are not aware of that, you're just being manipulated by other people. The second thing is civics. If we want to be in a democracy, we want to be active citizens, we need to be media literate, we need to be contributing to the media and working with it. The third one is well-being. Do we know when to stop consuming media? How to consume media, what to do with that, what kind of issues, psychological issues it does, and what is our power to take control over it. And the last one is self-efficacy. If we understand how it affects us and what's our role and how we work, we can be much more efficient in our daily work, in our life. So this is the why. This is basically for administrators, for lawmakers to understand why we need media literacy. And this is like a 4-page PDF on our website that is very easy to consume, especially for legislators. Then we move to, okay, so what does it mean? And there is 10 concepts, there is a lot of concepts, there is 12 concepts, but we just put it 4 so people can actually understand better. So concept number 1 is manufacture reality. Media is not the reality. I can take a picture of an event that happened, but I'm taking it from a specific frame, from a specific perspective. And if I take it from that perspective, that's not the full reality. And if I understand that the media that I'm consuming that may be angry because somebody posted something horrible and I'm so activated, I need to stop for a second. Wait a second. There was a different angle. It might not be the whole story. So to understand that media manufacture reality and not replicating reality is the first concept of media literacy, to understand and then stop for a second and really analyze what's happening and what's happening to me. The second one is The Medium is the Message, which is a famous 60s Marshall McLuhan title of his book. And the idea is that the choice of the medium impact the content more than the content itself. To say I love you on the phone versus a text versus an email versus a TikTok video is a very different message, although it's the same message. But the medium shapes the way that it's being perceived or manufactured, right? So that's the second concept of media literacy, to teach the medium theory and how each medium impacts you differently. The third one is media influences. We don't know how exactly what, but we know that media influence. Some people say that it creates more violence, some people, but we know it influences, and it influences people in different ways. And we need to acknowledge that in order to really address issues of the media. And the last one is empowerment, which is the premise of media literacy. If you practice media literacy, you feel this empowerment that you have more control of your life and of your consumptions, because media is everywhere. So it's part of our, like, every second of our life. So we provided resources for each one with organization in the US for teachers, and we didn't do a lot. We didn't put 100 resources, we put 6 resources so teachers can really easy click, see if they want, they can use it. And again, you can go to our website, it's the ilmlc.org. And all of it, again, it's a very easy website, 4 pages. But the most important thing that we did was this thing. And we said that media literacy is not a subject matter, but it's a pedagogy. But I want to correct that statement that I'm saying all the time, because media literacy is not a pedagogy. Media literacy is the outcome of the pedagogy. It's the outcome of media education. If you see, this conference is about media education, because media education is the process. Media literacy is the outcome. Media literacy is what you want your students to have after you did the media education process. And what we did here, it took us 6 months. We took different standards of different subject matter to tell teachers that media literacy is not its own subject matter. And again, Illinois, it's a unit of instruction that can be taught in special ed, it can be taught in physical ed, it can be taught in art, English language arts, in science. And you see there is even science education there. So we took the standards that teachers know and they need to kind of check that they do, and we say, if you do this, 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 and this part of media literacy, and that's how you do it. And this is a document that have been translated to French for the French national organization, CLEMI, that are using with their teachers now, explaining that media education and the outcome of media literacy are across all subject matter, and it needs to be implemented as something that is pedagogically in every subject matter. And so, to how I'm on time, okay, I can go to the UNESCO example. Just to show you an example from Chicago, where I am, students in 5th grade didn't like the way that President Trump was talking about Chicago and was calling it Chirac, meaning Chicago, Iraq, that there is gun violence, and it's not like there's no gun violence, but depicting their neighborhood and their city as a place of like battle and war. And so what they did, they connected with the Chicago Sun-Times, and they wrote to the Chicago Tribune and created a video that they're rebuttaling and saying, no, our city is great, and that's how it looks, and looking what's really happening, and not about somebody from outside saying this is what Chicago looks like, to show what they think about their own neighborhood. And again, that's the idea. Like I'm teaching with student voice in my class, that's what Illinois is trying to do, to really elevate the student voice so that they feel empowered. They have the ability to create to learn, we're talking about, to really be able to fight back using media literacy, using practices that would help spread their opinion versus the big media opinion. So for like 5 minutes, I'm just going to give you an overview from world. As Christina mentioned, I edited the Routledge book on media education future post-pandemic. You can see we had representation from 52 27 countries, 57 chapters, and I'm also the vice chair of UNESCO Media Literacy International Steering Committee. And so to show you different initiatives that are taking different approach. So Turkey, for example, have Teyit, which is a fact-checking organization that is backed up by Poynter Institute and the European Union. And what they're doing, they created this model of fact-checking and helping people to help them fact-check. In Portugal, there is a very interesting initiative, again, sponsored by European Union and the European Digital Media Observatory and the Quality, Trust and Diversity in Journalism, that journalists are training teachers. It started during the pandemic via Zoom, and then it moved to be professional development of 300 educators in Portugal, where the journalists are going through training of media literacy, then they're training the teachers, and then the teachers are teaching their students. Another model is the Brazilian model, that they get federal and corporate support. Our friends in Educa Media, they're using something called Educomunicación, and they're doing institute with professional development with the Palavra Alberta Institute to provide professional development, but they're also working on legislation and working in advocacy with the politician to really make sure that it's embedded with federal funding. The last one is Educ Media in Cameroon. This is a civic society organization. They're not getting funding from corporates. They don't get funding from the state. They're really a small organization that is very devoted, that goes into classroom, working with international collaboration, trying to get funding to really spread media literacy in Cameroon. And it's interesting because they're French-speaking, so the head of it also speak English and then get exposed to other English materials, but they're exposed mainly into French materials in media literacy, which are some, but not as in English. And so they're really fighting for it, but that's also a different model of using civil society or NGOs like in the US. So just to sum up, in the book, what we try to explain is that the media education ecosystem is really complicated. It has the media, it has the context, but it needs to have the different supports. But in the middle of it, really what we found out is the issues of access. And I'm going to talk about access tomorrow, but between all the different competency, access, which is the first one, is the one that is the most difficult one around the world. That people don't have the access, and then they cannot get all to the other competencies. Because if you don't get access, then you're being denied to even start and learn about it. But the big thing that we try to do is at the top of the triangle to put the authors, the audience, and the learners. And the teachers, we didn't put educators up there because we think the educators are like really the ones that are supporting and working with all of that, where the learners are part of this audience and authors. And it's not really separated because your students, the people you're working with, they're creating media, even by retweeting, reposting, or not retweeting, putting exposed, sorry. But the educators, we put them in a different place because the educators, we think, are the social change agents. That's what you are. You have a mission to come and work with the students, elevate, help them understand things. You are also authors and audiences. We didn't know if we should put with the authors and audience and learner or separate. The idea of the separation is not to say that you're like a different species, but the idea is that your responsibility is big because you demystify, you help them really understand and work on their media literacy skill. And that's why we separated through the media literacy skills of helping them. And all of that in the middle of this huge context and the media industry and the support that sometimes is lacking or not. So I'm going to end with this quote that since I finished editing the book 2 years ago, I always finish with it because okay, so those are the conclusions, which I don't have time, but basically, if you want to practice fact-checking and accuracy, you need to master media literacy as inquiry. right? To do this kind of search like I do with my students on conspiracy theory. If you want to fight misinformation, you need to do trust building, not persuading. If you start negotiating facts, that's not going to help. You need to build trust to really make a change. And then the last one, if you really want truth-seeking, you need to give your students an autonomy and the student voice to really have them be empowered and be able to do the things that you want them to do. And so the last thing is to finish with this quote, because that gives me hope when I'm discouraged. And as we said, those are troubling times with all the war going on, with everything that's happening. But we really need to see that we're the social change agents. We are the ones that should bring the hope so that our students, our society will prevail. Thank you. Do we have time for questions or not? Okay. So, questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm an ETA in Moldova. Thank you so much for your talk. So I find the trend of getting news primarily from social media really troubling. I'm not on TikTok that much, but I know on Instagram, the main kind of news trend is sharing through infographics, which may or may not have good information, are never complete because they're so small. And those tend to become kind of a socially, like a certain narrative may become socially profitable among your followers to repost, retweet, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen a few influencers posting when horrible things are happening in the world about normal things, and their audience will be like, this horrible thing is happening, how dare you be posting photos of you at the beach or your kids, but they may not know anything about what's going on. So how would you address this trend of news being connected to social profitability? And what do you think the implications are on the accuracy of the news young people in America are receiving because of that? Thank you.
So that's a huge question, right? So what I do is, again, I have my own personal opinion. I have my own media consumption. When I see something and I see so many things that outrages me, I'm trying to meditate for a second and kind of like, okay, then let's see if it's really true. I go to Tiny Eye, try to see where this image is from really and who manipulated and stuff like that. But with my students, I do what I said. So the way is really, I went through 30 years of media literacy education. I cannot expect somebody in 5th grade to be at the same level of the practice that I did, right? It takes 10,000 hours to get to a habit. So I cannot expect a 5th grader that never had this habit to suddenly have and fact check and look at things. So this is something about talking about it. That's why I said that even media addiction is something we need to put in the front. The idea is to be transparent, to share what is my experiences, have a discussion, but eventually have the students decide and realize what's happening. Because if I tell you what's right and what's wrong, are you going to actually listen? I don't know. But if I let you go through a process and realize what's good for you, what you want, that will stay more. So I'm not going to change the media industry right now. I might fight on different things, but in my classroom, I want to have a discussion, I want to have a dialogue, and I want you to get to your aha moment to what's working for you and how you do that. And I will steer you to the way that I think, obviously, but you'll have your decision to make. So I hope that's kind of helping. Thank you with that question. Yes?
Hi, I wanted to thank you for your talk. It was very interesting, so thank you for that. What I was wanting to ask about is how to get students engaged in this topic, because I know, so I'm teaching in Georgia, and from my understanding, they are not political people, the young people. They have no interest in politics. They have no interest because to them it's a joke. And I see this in the US as well among my friends of my age that say, why should I be involved? Why should I be interested? I don't want to care about this. I don't need to care about this. So how do you ramp up interest, I guess, is the biggest question.
So I had the year that I was thinking of being a drama therapist. And there is a concept in drama therapy for trauma intervention of dramatic alienation. And the idea is when you're too close to something that traumatizes you, you need some kind of alienation in order to kind of like be able to start the healing process. I know it sounds like it's not connected, but it's highly connected. So they might not feel political about the president of Georgia, but if you talk to them about the fight between Ye and Taylor Swift, they'll be highly engaged. So who cares if it's the Prime Minister of Georgia or if it's Taylor Swift and Ye fighting? It's the same analysis. And once they're learning that, then they can go and apply. Because what's happening in their own life, you need to bring their interest. So instead of bringing what you think will be interesting for them, I would ask them, okay, so what did you talk to at dinner? Like, what did you talk with your friend 5 minutes ago? What was this text that you just texted about? What was that? And then having them, and then the practices are the same practices. The topic, whatever, doesn't matter. Have them bring the topics that is what they want to talk about, or you bring something that is so far away that they'll be engaged because it's something interesting about the new game that came out or something like that. So I hope that that gives an answer. Yes?
Thank you. As also René underlined and you touched also in your presentation, there is a business model as we speak. So during your talk, Big Tech just cashed in 76 million US dollars as revenues, because this is the revenue per hour. If you're divided 670 billion to the number of hours in 1 year, this is the result. So it's a big game, it's a huge business, and it's a business driven mostly by American companies and a Chinese company now. Since the cause of this issue is that there is a business model that's it's encouraging the production of fake news, it's encouraging the monetization of hate, it's encouraging all this craziness. How do you see, from being an American citizen and from inside the American society, are the big tech companies also accountable and they have to take some measures? Is realistic for them to take some measures? Because we are spending a lot of money, we are doing a lot of things, but basically just sitting with 5 or 6 or 10 guys at the table, we can take some really meaningful decisions to try to solve this problem. Or the capitalism should be let alone and we have to solve it as civil society. Thank you.
Yes, good question. So, fight capitalism in the US, great question. So obviously, there are, I think I shared with you yesterday, All Tech is Human, that they're doing like advocacy work because all the big tech company just fired a lot of their ethic like board. So Facebook doesn't have it, Google doesn't have it. So what's going on there, it's really frightening. And I think as citizens, as educators, and having a national organization and local chapter like the Illinois one is where we raise those things, to educate people to really fight for it by elections, by fight for it. But in the classroom itself, obviously, the students need to use their own kind of way to fight back, but they also want to learn how to earn money, and they think, my students anyway, all of them want to be influencers. And I need to explain to them, well, it's like 30 years ago when I was in film school, everybody wanted to be Fellini or Spielberg or like, you know, not gonna happen exactly. And so the business model is not just about the profit of the big 5 companies, is also to understand how I gonna be part of this economy, what's my contribution, how do I play with it. And obviously in the US, issues of regulation are very different than any other place that I know because of freedom of speech, because of the First Amendment. So that's also an issue to kind of discuss and see that is different, for example, in Romania versus in the US. And that's also something to discuss because I'm not sure that students for all the Fulbrighter to understand how the US value the freedom of expression and what does that mean versus what they experiencing here is very, very different to understand the cultural like differences. But definitely there's a difference between what I do in the classroom versus me as a civic activist, like what I want to do to make the company accountable, because they're definitely not accountable. And that's why I don't have a Facebook, I don't have WhatsApp, which my whole family is angry at me that I move everybody to Signal, and they're, what is Signal? But I'm saying, hey, it's private and it's not using your data like Meta is. So I'm trying to educate my family and other people about that, but that's my own kind of, work toward the big tech company. I wish I could sit with 5 of them and force them to change, but that's a whole political issue in the US, as we know. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and also for providing such great answers.